Podcast.
The Profile. You're listening to Premier Christian Radio.
Hello, you're listening to Premier Christian Radio. I'm Tola Mbakwe. Welcome to The Profile. This is the show where we sit down with a guest to find out about their life, faith, and testimony. This show is brought to you in association with Premier Christianity magazine. For a free sample copy of the magazine, visit premierchristianity.com/free sample. Today on the show, I'm joined by Bob Fu. Bob is one of the leading voices in the world for persecuted faith communities in China. After suffering extreme persecution for his Christian faith in the country, he fled to the US and began religious freedom charity China Aid. Let's listen in. I think it's fair to say you're the most prominent religious activist for China.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. But growing up as a young boy, I'm sure you didn't think your life would turn out like this. Tell me about your childhood. What was your childhood like?
Well, not at all. As you know, I just during my childhood, I was pretty much, struggling how to feed myself on a every day, and because of the poverty, my mom was a beggar. And her ex-husband could not even afford, food and accommodation, and asked her to leave home to survive, basically. So for several years, she was on the road begging food with my elder brother and elder sister, and until she met with my father, and who was a disabled man, and I was born in that family. So that was kind of a situation. I was born and raised, and you can imagine what would you be treated. So by the society. So I was always bullied by villagers, by other children, peers, and so that was a kind of the primary memory for me. And of course, I have very caring parents. So because of, I guess, my mom's it's a humbling experience, I always watched a bunch of beggars always gathered at our house, and we always give them the best we can we have to feed them, to help them. So I think out of that, God planted some compassion, for the poor, for the needy, in my heart. Of course, I want to change. So that was another kind of seed in my heart.
Some people, they say that even though they didn't grow up in a Christian household, sometime in their life, God revealed themselves, or there was an opportunity where God revealed themselves. Did you have any of that sort of experience as a child that you can remember? In a theological term, maybe it's a kind of a reflection of God's general revelation of His presence. Was I remembered because of my mom's begging experience, during the great starvation time, turmoil in 1958 to 1960, when because of the EU policy, over 40 million Chinese starved to death. Right. So my mom, when she was begging, many times she said, she was telling me again and again about these stories that on the road of begging food and seeing the two children were crying, because of starvation. She always looked upon to some kind of, in the Chinese kind of folksy sense, called a heavenly grandpa. Even in a personal sense, she said, that there is a kind of this divine character was always looking after her, and when she was kind of, she didn't know God, didn't know the Bible. We were not a Christian family at all, and but
she said whenever she cried out to this heavenly grandpa, somehow somebody would deliver a cup of soup to feed the two children. So that kind of impressed me. There's something beyond this earth, beyond this world. But I was raised as an atheist. Of course, that's under the Chinese Communist Party's ruling. And I was born actually 2 years after Chairman Mao launched the Cultural Revolution. And so we're all educated all the way from elementary school to my graduate school as a kind of atheistic ideology is the predominant until I became a Christian. Yeah.
Now let's go into that. You were exposed to Christianity at university.
That's right.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the first encounter about Christianity was actually through my American English teachers. They were all Christians. Well, most of them were Christians, but they were also kind of secret missionaries. So they have a gospel mission over there, and they try every opportunity to kind of find a way to share a little bit about their faith. And I remembered I was at that time politically pretty radical. I was, tried to join the Communist Party, tried to change the world, change China, kind of with my own effort and by relying on the Communist Party. So I always kind of leading the debate with my American teacher when they tried to raise this theistic argument. Yeah. And, we use we call it always winning dialectical materialism. That's the term. And sometimes he say something about the Bible and we have no clue because we have never read or heard. And so by the end of the day, we can't really have any agreement. And I say, okay, maybe God is just an American God. We Chinese don't need an American God to help us. We only need, Microsoft and McDonald's. That was, a technology and, maybe some Western food. And, but that's it. So that was until really 1989 when the students' democracy movement started. That's the first time, seriously, when I became a student leader. And then, of course, organizing the protest, went to Tiananmen Square, and kind of during that time, as you know that when the Communist Party sent military tanks and killed and massacred hundreds, if not thousands, of citizens. So that was the time of my life, kind of lowest point when I was kind of being persecuted politically as a student leader, and then my American teacher smuggled a booklet for Chinese pastor's testimony. So through that testimony, I came to Christ. That was really the first seriously exposure to Christian faith. And then later on, of course, I got my first copy of the Bible after my conversion, 1 year later, and so engaging the Word of the Lord. Yeah.
Wow. So tell me, you at one point in your life, after becoming a Christian, you were teaching English to Communist Party officials while still being a Christian. Tell me, when you're getting ready for work every day, what was going on in your mind? What were you thinking?
Well, that was before I finished my graduate school, because my major was English, but my graduate school is on international relations. So most of my classmates, kind of went to the business and working for the government or foreign ministry. And I was praying. I was already a kind of a house church pastor, underground pastor. And I was praying my prayer. I said, God, give me a job that I can serve the Communist Party with the least of time. Because in China, at that time, every university graduate are supposed to be assigned for a job. And so you can't really go independent. And with the most of the time, my prayer, I said, I want to serve you, especially this hundreds of thousands of hungry souls in the university areas in Beijing. So God humorously, gave me a job, and I became an English teacher, teaching English at the daytime to the Communist Party leaders. And in the evening and the weekend, I was just much busier than my real full-time faculty job in the party school. And the most beautiful thing was by the end of each month, I got a full-time, faculty paycheck from the Communist Party directly as my mission fund. That was the beauty of things like that. And so God sustained me, and I worked there for 3 years, and then later on, of course, my wife and I were both thrown into Chinese prison, and we started our prison theology course.
Yes, tell us about that. So that was kind of like the turning point in your life when you and your wife were arrested for illegal evangelism. What gave you the boldness to start a house church in the first place?
Well, it was all driven by really the understanding of the good news, right? We call the gospel, as the good news of Jesus Christ. And, before we knew the good news, of course, we understand the bad news. But, I was always thinking, how to best serve my family, my friends, and my fellow country. And after I became Christian, of course, reading the scripture and realized that, if you have money will run out. You can give to people. If you can help create some job opportunities, and job, will be, in the end, you will face the eternal, life or death choice. And we have the gospel, that Jesus has already accomplished the salvation on the cross, and we are just, as God's ambassador, for Him, that we just need to proclaim faithfully this gospel of Jesus Christ, and by faith that this decision of eternal life or eternal condemnation is so serious business, and we Christians are given this as the messenger for God's this greatest news, right? The best news, not only good, it's the best news. So I just felt this is the best job, you can have the most honorable title as the ambassador for Christ. So that was the very simple motivation for me. So as I said, I want to share. I want to really see more and more those Chinese, my fellow countrymen, to come to Christ. And, if they know and accept and really being adopted into the family of Christ and become a follower of Jesus, then that they will not need to worry about this kind of other things. So that was the initial motivation. And of course, China, the persecution was always on the horizon. I have interviewed and met so many, especially first, second generation of early Chinese Christian, in the early church. And the pastor who baptized me, Pastor Yang from Beijing, spent more than 16 years in prison for the gospel. And Pastor Alan Yuan from Beijing, who married my wife and I, spent over 22 months and 22 years and 8 months in prison. So I got hold of that sense. It's called prison theology. You have to take it. And I just felt, God is faithful. His promise is He is not like delivering outside this world after you become a follower, but He has a sufficient grace to protect you and to show His faithfulness. I think that's that's how, the kind of a firm belief that I was being made aware and trusted. I feel that, it's just to trust the Lord, right?
Exactly.
And knowing that He will be faithful even in prison. So
tell me about that time with you and your wife in prison. How did they find out that you all were running a church in the first place?
Yeah, we were discovered by the Chinese state security agents that not only, of course, when working in the Communist Party school was a pretty sensitive job already. I didn't know that they had already have their, secret surveillance on me and my wife, on our kind of church activities, because we are also ministering to this sensitive group, the Chinese university students. And the Communist Party always nervous that, they would be kind of, converted to be loyal to something else. Yeah. So they are called the successors of communism, And plus, we also started an underground Bible school. And I think that triggered, because, to start up an underground Bible school and for the Communist Party, not being kind of aware is more difficult. Yeah. So they traced back. So I was the black hand behind that. So they took me and my wife into prison.
Tell me about your emotions during that time. What was going through your head when you were taken to prison?
Well, that was the day, actually, I still remember Heidi and I, we actually were studying and reading in the second Peter, about my brothers, don't be surprised when these trials and tribulations, and you need to rejoice, right? And knowing, so that was kind of, I thought that's the Holy Spirit kind of, prepared our heart to prepare for the prison theology course. And, of course, it was initially a little scary. Because we have never experienced that kind of a group of secret police just, with their video cameras on. They were like started to search every corner, including kind of make our bed upside down, basically try to search everything and put all the Bibles, everything on the floor. And then I was taken into prison and started the first 3 days and nights of non-stop interrogation, and without any kind of sleep. Right, they have their own interrogators around the clock, and sometimes they kind of knock my head, beat me. So it was kind of initially was a little hard experience. But I don't know. Yeah, I think the very testimonies that I heard from those early church leaders helped me a lot, and of course the word of the Lord helped me a lot, knowing that He will be faithful to the end. And the hardest thing was actually you didn't know whether our brothers and sisters in the outside world, know where you are and what you are, going through. And it's kind of a total isolation. And because they took action so abruptly, right? And so until one time, when the interrogator kind of sarcastically told me, said, Pastor Fu or Brother Fu, they called me Brother Fu. They said many in the outside world are deeply caring about you. That was, I think, God's way to use the mouth of the interrogator to give me comfort. So then I knew there must be many brothers and sisters were aware and start praying for me, and that really gave me a lot of strength to go through. And then we were sort of after the interrogation sent to the prison cell.
So you were eventually released, is that correct?
Yes.
And then, but you were still on, is it house arrest or probation, or you were still being watched?
Yeah, we were released after 2 months. Both Heidi and I were released on the same day too. And then we were put under kind of house arrest. And that means any time the security agents that were signed. Ironically, I found one agent was one of my students in the party school. So he obviously was already there installed, pretending to be my student, sitting in the classroom, maybe monitoring me.
So he was a double agent, just like you were a double
agent.
So
we are the counterforce.
Yes.
Well, we are God's double agents. They are human double agents.
Yes, yes.
But it was really during that time, we were, Heidi and I were just at midnight being taken to a park or taken to a police station for further threatening investigation, and force us to collaborate and cooperate with the secret police. They tried to force us to betray other brothers and sisters who were, communicating or wanting to communicate with us. So then Heidi was pregnant without a permit. That's the family planning policy. Even though we were married for 3 years already, the party school would not deliver us a quota. The family planning policy, even for the first child, at that time you have to give a birth permit first, a yellow card. Otherwise, you could face forced abortion. That's really the Chinese Communist Party's, single-handed, the most kind of horrendous human rights violation and atrocities especially against women and girls. And the Chinese government announced some years ago that during the 30 years of family planning, they proudly announced that they had successfully prevented over 300 million Chinese children from being born. So many, at least 2/3 of them were forcefully aborted. Women were really slaughtered. The pregnancy sometimes is 8 months, 9 months, even 10 months. I knew that. I have interviewed and sometimes receive phone call. Some pastor's wife even being caught and taken to the hospital when that Christian lady was 9 months pregnancy with a boy, and being put 2 poison doses of injection and kill the baby. So we were very, of course, aware of that, and we couldn't think of any other way to stay in Beijing without being caught and for possible forced abortion. So that's the time prompted Heidi and I decided to run away and fled out of Beijing and hiding in the countryside. And then essentially God opened the door miraculously for us to escape. So we got into Hong Kong, essentially. And then a year later, less than a year later, we were accepted as refugees to the United States. 3 days before Hong Kong was handed over to China from the British control. Yeah.
Look how God works.
Yeah, that's another miracle. Yeah.
So your arrival to America, that's when, I guess, it was a ray of sunshine after all the turmoil that you've been through. Tell me, what was life like when you arrived in America?
Well, it was, totally different environment, right? Of course, much better air quality and more blue sky. Like you're from Virginia, and we ended up in Philadelphia, so East Coast, and I started my Westminster Theological Seminary study, and really the first month, I started the summer Greek. I had not handled English well, so started Greek and then Hebrew. And I think the most dramatic difference, of course, is the religious freedom. You know, you kind of here you are. You don't need to worry about being arrested, you know, for holding a Bible study anymore. And Heidi and I, you know, saw our children, you know, can sleep so peacefully at night, and they don't need to worry about their parents being taken away for, you know, organizing a house church and for a prayer meeting. And but at the same time, you know, you kind of keep getting all this news. All these brothers and sisters keep calling us, you know, communicating with us, said, you know, oh, you know, please help. You know, we're just the police is knocking on the door. You know, sometimes I could hear the police and the security forces knocking on the door of a house church, and I could hear they break into the door. I could hear they try to, you know, take away their Bibles, you know, kind of confiscating all their church properties, and I could hear their crying, and so I felt, well, you know, I many times actually initially I feel a little guilty of abandoning, you know, kind of my suffering brothers and sisters over there, and make me wonder, you know, I'm now enjoying a peaceful environment, free, enjoying the religious freedom to study here, and you know, what could I do for them? What, you know, how can I connect with my fellow brothers and sisters and continuously? So that's prompted Heidi and I started this ministry called China Aid. And so that's the ministry with a dedication to, you know, like the Ministry of Release International, our partner organization in the UK, who had been really faithfully partnering with us in supporting those suffering brothers and sisters. So our mission is like kind of a Chinese focused version of Release International. Okay. In essence, is we are a voice for these voiceless brothers and sisters, and we provide a family prisoner support for those who are imprisoned. We also help them find a Christian lawyer to defend them in the court. And we also, of course, do some biblical trainings for the church leaders. So we call it a 3E mission: expose the abuses, encouraging the abused, and equipping the leaders. So I think the biggest shock was the church shock, you know. So, you know, so many churches. When I enrolled at Westminster Seminary, I was asked to identify which denomination, like 2-3 pages, at least maybe 200 denominations were there. Make me really kind of confused. You know?
Like, oh, I'm just Christian.
So we don't have a lot of denominations in China, either house church, you know, independent, you know, worshiping the Lord, and or a government-sanctioned church, you know, obeying the government rule.
I'm Tola Mbakwe. You're listening to my interview with Bob Fu. Join us again after this to hear more.
Everyone's favourite satirist Adrian Plass pens a new sacred diary for the latest edition of Premier Christianity magazine, with his unique take on the phenomenon of the Christian festival. Plus, we ask, how should believers respond to identity politics? Is smoking the cardinal sin it's often made out to be? Hugh Ross tells how astrophysics brought him face-to-face with the Creator, and we bring you a special report on the megachurch movement in the USA, going behind the scenes of 6 of America's biggest churches. All that plus much more. Ask for your free edition at premierchristianity.com/free sample.
The Profile. You're listening to Premier Christian Radio.
Where faith comes to life.
Hello, you're listening to Premier Christian Radio. I'm Tola Mbakwe. Welcome to The Profile. This is the show where we sit down with a guest to find out about their life, faith, and testimony. This show is brought to you in association with Premier Christianity magazine. For a free sample copy of the magazine, visit premierchristianity.com/free sample. Today on the show, I'm joined by Bob Fu.
You came to be, I guess, quite prominent when the case of Chen Guangcheng came up, the lawyer that wanted to get rid of the one-child policy and then was imprisoned. So that's a very well-known case. But tell me about one of your successes from China Aid that may not be that prominent, or maybe people may not know about, but you're very proud of.
There are a number of cases. I can just name two. Just happened last year. So one case involved a Chinese female professor. Her husband was a human rights lawyer who was part of the kind of victims of Chinese Communist Party's war against lawyers. Since July 2015, over 300 some lawyers were arrested, detained, rounded up, and many of them were tortured. So her husband was one of the lawyers, called Mr. Lawyer Xie Yang from Hunan province in South China, and he was reportedly being tortured, with 25 or 6 different ways of torture during his 2 years in prison. So his wife, who is a university professor, could not keep silent anymore. She started speaking up. Then she was being rounded up, and even the authorities kind of interrogate her 15-year-old daughter alone in a dark room. So when I learned about that, of course, knowing they're going to face imminent danger, so we decided to rescue them. So we rescued them kind of out of China into Bangkok in Thailand, and then Chinese government kind of somehow intercept our kind of communication somewhere and kidnap them from the Bangkok, the hiding place, and put them into Thailand immigration prison. And within a few hours, they were facing deportation back to the Chinese prison. So that was the time really shows God's miracle and absolute faithfulness that it was within a few hours of really life or death. And God really providentially, I got hold of one Chinese prisoner inside that prison in Thailand who happened to have a cell phone, and turn on his phone only like a certain 1 hour every day. And it was then I immediately locate where this family is being held in that prison, and alerted the State Department, the U.S. Embassy, and then the U.S. Sent diplomat and Marines went there and rescued them out of a Thailand prison. Then, of course, after that, the Thailand government was pressured by the Chinese and would not let them, kind of board their flight. And then another miracle happened. It was just one after another. Was that critical, within a couple of weeks, God intervened, and even kind of prompt President Trump himself in the Oval Office made the final decision, kind of still classified. I can't see too many details, but in the end, this family were rescued and out of China and finally land in the free country, and they're now very happily living in our community in West Texas. So that was a very dramatic story.
Really
shows really God's faithfulness.
Yeah. Now, speaking about Trump, do you think Trump has a true heart for Christian religious freedom, or do you think he's just trying to cater to evangelicals that supported him?
I think based on, of course, he's a little, over a year in office, right? But based on my dealings with the White House, this Trump White House, and the State Department, I've been invited to the White House twice already. Met, with his senior aide, or at least we have already under his administration successfully helped rescued 3-4 different families, and we got a full cooperation and support, and especially the one I just mentioned. No other administration, even including other Republican president, President Bush was a very good friend. He was also compassionate on religious freedom. And President Obama invited me also to the White House, and I couldn't imagine they would have the guts and really the courage to make this kind of decision, to involve the whole U.S. assets, in another country to rescue a Chinese, kind of desperate family out of the Chinese, hands almost. I mean, the Chinese spies were surrounding the Thailand immigration prison. Almost a street fight with the U.S. Marines happened in the early March of last year. So, of course, other effort that I have been collaborating and, on the overall policy, I could see, I think President Trump is sincere in this front. And because he doesn't need to, do this because no other president would dare to anger Thailand, anger China. These are big deals, right? And of course, the reason was not publicly reported about these details I just mentioned. Of course, again, some details are still classified. It was China was a big animal, big elephant in the room. But I think he has the guts and courage to take this action, and I certainly feel he's very unique and also with the sincere heart and compassion to those persecuted. Yeah.
Okay. Now, being a religious freedom activist for China, you actually haven't been able to go back to China. Is that frustrating?
Well, it was true initially. After all, you were, your birthplace, right? Your kind of motherland on this worldly sense, and you still have some family members. You try to, you kind of could not help at sometimes thinking about that. But what compared to the scenario that if I go back, it's most likely, as both the U.S. law enforcement warned me, and of course the spiritual discernment of my family and my board, if I, the Chinese government actually sent me invitation quite a few times officially, even offer a very high rank, a Communist Party official to meet with me. And of course I know it's a part of the either a united front work or maybe a one-way ticket for me to go back to the Chinese prison. You never know. But compared to that, what God has been using this ministry and the voice that God entrusted me to speak for those brothers and sisters, I feel very content that staying here. And after all, the spiritual teaching, and I have a deep realization that isn't that the teaching in the book of Hebrews that where is our hometown? Where is our eternal home? Right? It's not really China. It's not really U.S. It's not Texas. It's not the UK. We have an eternal heavenly home. So that comfort me, and I feel wherever I go. And as long as fulfilling what God has called me to do, and that is my hometown, and I think that is my family member. So that's kind of my rationale.
Yes. Now let's switch gears here to persecution in China. Now, for someone who has absolutely no idea what life is like for a Christian in China, just paint that picture for me.
Yeah, so the in a very general kind of description is Christians in China, of course, are in the eyes of the Chinese government, especially in the later, in the past really 5 years, if we see the recently. Is a very kind of threatening force in the eyes of the Communist Party, certainly under President or Emperor Xi. Now it's kind of you're always being seen as a suspicious force, Christianity was portrayed as a foreign religion, Western religion, being suspected as a foreign infiltration force, to subvert the state power of the Communist Party. That's why, in the past year alone, 2017, according to our own documentation, at least over 220, some 3,000 of Christians are being directly targeted for persecution. And we have documented, that was like nearly 4 times, more number than the previous year. And we have documented the cases were doubled. And the individuals who were detained has reached to 3,700 were actually detained with the legal term, and several hundred were even sent to criminal sentence. Some were sentenced to 13 years, 10 years, 8 years. It's a constant threat, I think, by the regime. We just received reports that church buildings were demolished, and many provinces now they are even banning the Christians to even have a simple family kind of worship together. And in Xinjiang, West China, we receive the latest information with photos showing, the government started to remove even the Christian signs, on the wall. During the Chinese New Year, we have couplets, right, on the put on the stick on the both sides of the door, right, and so the government would send the officials to remove these couplets and replace with the Chairman Xi's portrait. And so the last time you saw that was the Cultural Revolution. So it is a new cultural revolution happening now. And in every government-sanctioned churches, now in front of the church building, there is a sign explicitly said the following 5 group or categories of people are forbidden to enter into the church. They're including the Communist Party members, the government, cadres, those who are under 18 years old, the students, and the Chinese military. And so they're classified groups who are not even allowed to enter into the church. And the government officials in Xinjiang, again, in West China, kind of arbitrarily arrested really hundreds of Christians just in the past few months. And we are still trying to document, and it was they were arbitrarily sent to what is called the study camp. It's a kind of a laogai, camp. It's a brainwash camp. They just make you disappear. Some husband and wife Christians just suddenly disappeared, and some officials even forced themselves to stay in Christian homes. This happened last week, and the government officials stayed in the Christian homes overnight in order to prevent them from a midnight secret, worship service. So we have never seen this kind of extreme persecution since the end of the Cultural Revolution. So there is a real kind of intensity of the persecution.
Over here we see videos of churches being demolished and crosses being taken down.
Yeah, that's another thing.
When you watch those videos, how do you feel?
Well, it was it just number one, it didn't make sense. The government, of course, in their public propaganda, they said, the size of the cross is problematic. It poses a public safety threat. Well, many churches has been there. Number one, the government sanctioned church buildings. Number two, many churches had been there for decades, and some even was built since 1924. before Communist Party took power. So their church, these are Catholic Church, Protestant churches. And why all of a sudden this cross, the size of the cross, became a public safety, threat? So you can't explain that away, except knowing that this is part of the overall strategy to reduce the visibility and influence of the Christian growth. Actually, I can give you a quote that showing behind the scenes the government mentality and rationale why they all of a sudden start doing this, burning the crosses and forcibly removing over 2,000 crosses, and and even, of course, total destruction of this some big churches. So the rationale, I quote the government secret document that we obtained after they launched this forced removal of cross campaign. It is said the purpose of this campaign is to contain the overheated growth of Christianity. End the quote. Overheated growth of Christianity. Of course, when I read that, I was kind of smiling, and as you know, said, hallelujah, that means the Communist Party even acknowledged there is a fast growth of Christianity, of course, with a different reasoning. They are worried. They feel, now the number of Chinese Christians have already reached to over 100 million. 100 million Christians, the number of Communist Party members is less than 90 million. So there are more Christians than these atheistic, Communist Party members. So they are worried, and they feel it's of course, a political threat in their eyes. I think that's why I think they are trying to contain this fast growth.
That is amazing that despite all this persecution and suppression, the church in China is still growing. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute to that really, of course, is a miracle. It's God's way to tell those persecutors that He's in control, not the Communist Party, not any party leaders, Chairman Mao or Chairman Xi. And in fact, God actually would still sitting, on His throne and laughing at them. I think in the end, maybe He would call Chairman Mao or even President Xi as he called the Nebuchadnezzar in the Babylonian time, and as his servant, right, in the opposite way, because really, when you go through the persecution, and the church is being purified, and your faith is really being tested, and especially, when you are, kind of being tortured or being tried, being beaten up, and that's when the God's grace really kind of pouring on you, and then really the kind of we call it prison theology. It's called a theology of the cross. It's basically when the non-believers, the Gentiles, when they see how these Christians respond to this persecution, and that really make them, astonished and feel attracted. And after all, who would declare, that when you are suffering the most brutal persecution, like Jesus on the cross being crucified, and who would still pronounce that prayer, said, Father, forgive them because they know not what they do. And when those persecuted Chinese Christians, that's happening to them in the prison, when they are beating up, they are still pronounced that love of Christ and forgiveness of Christ, and told the persecutors, the torturers, and said, I still love you and I forgive you because Christ forgave me. I think that is the essence of the cross, right? And so when you are going through the similar suffering and with Christ, as the Bible says, we're not only granted to believe in Christ, but also to suffer with Him or suffer for Him. So I think that was the process, God showing his faithfulness. And when the cross is being lifted up, and that's where, the revival happens again and again.
What are your hopes and your prayers and for the future for China?
My hopes and prayer is really after President Xi successfully maneuvered to be the long president, without term limits, and essentially he's crowned himself as the Emperor Xi, right? Because the last time some Communist Party leader enjoy that lifelong tenure is Chairman Mao, and before that is all the emperors in the history of China. And we could expect there will be more persecution. Actually, will be more intensified persecution. So a major spiritual storm is happening in China, as I just listed. But at the same time, I'm always hopeful, and because I have reason, both from the teaching of the scripture and also the experience of the history of Christianity, especially the Chinese church history, showing that the Communist Party in the past 60 some plus years, has never stopped persecuting Christians. Not a single day there's not a Christian being imprisoned. When Communist Party took power in 1949, there's only 1 million Christians. Less than 1 million. Look, today, 60 years later, after non-stop persecution, as I just mentioned, over 100 million. So it's a 100-fold growth already. And despite of the persecution, so I could see, according to a university, Purdue University in Indiana, the group of sociologists a few years ago did a study and use a scientific formulation that they studied the past 100 years religious growth, not only Christianity but other religions. So they projected, by 2030. The number of Chinese Christians will definitely, inevitably reach to at least 224 million. That will make China the largest really Christian nation by, the next decade. It's not very actually too long. So that gave me, I see, because our God, of course, is a living God, and he worked the same way yesterday, today, and forever. And I that gave me a more optimistic, kind of spirit. And maybe, as I said, at the end of the day, Emperor Xi may help speed up the Christianization process through this persecution, time. So that's, I feel, some encouragement and comfort to our brothers and sisters in China and to the free world.
And lastly, Bob, how can Christians here in the UK pray for Christians in China?
The Christians in the UK, of course, this trip I sponsored and by our partner organization, Release International. I was so thrilled to see, that Release International actually had this 3 months prayer bulletins. Every day they have listed, very specific, country and individual or a trend, from China, North Korea, these 30 some plus countries. So China was highlighted over there. I think, we can pray that those prisoners in China, those Christian prisoners, would steadfastly kind of standing firm on their faith and, without any wavering, and even in prison, continue their kind of joyful spirit to realize they're worthy of this suffering for Christ. I think, as I just said, the hardest thing was isolation, right? So when they realized that in prison, they're still being used by God share the gospel, to live a godly life in prison. And secondly, to pray for those persecutors. The Bible has Saul to Paul, right? Who knows? We should pray for President Xi Jinping and his cabinet and his other Politburo members. And there are, many actually Communist Party members are secret Christians. And that's a reality. And we just, need to pray more earnestly for those top persecutors and to, let the Holy Spirit work in their heart and to enlighten them, soften their heart. And because the heart of the king, is in the hands of the Yahweh, Jehovah. So he can make them rise up. They can make them fall instantly. And if they continue to do things that God is not pleased, like the pharaohs in Egypt, God can do anything to them to let them know He is the Lord overall and over them. So thirdly, we can, pray and also take prayerful actions, to write letters to the Chinese authorities for these prisoners, to write letters to the prisoner themselves, to encourage them. They may not receive these letters immediately, but you can be sure that those prisoners, once they receive, 100, 1,000, 100,000 letters, then their immediate treatment in prison would be way much better. I remembered one prisoner, a Christian lady, who was an editor-in-chief of Underground Church magazine. Her name is Li Ying. When she was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment, we, along with the release and Voice of Martyrs in America, launched a global letter campaign to her labor camp. And within a few weeks, our record shows several thousand letters were sent there. And we didn't know until her mom visited her a few months later, and she was asking her mom, of course, during the family visitation time, she said, "Mom, what had happened?" And the prisoner guards kept asking me, "How many overseas relatives do you have?" That's kind of, she was, of course, her treatment was way much better, and her sentence was reduced to at least over a year and a half. And so that makes a difference. And certainly, we can use our financial resources, to give to those faithful organizations, empower them to walk with the persecuted brothers and sisters.
This show is brought to you in association with Premier Christianity Magazine. For a free sample copy of the magazine, visit premierchristianity.com/free sample. Coming up next here on Premier Christian Radio is Premier Playback.